So, as you may or may not know, I've been spending some time challenging Ayn Rand, and I've been challenging her idea that we are born tabula rasa. That's her word for it, or her phrase. A more common phrase for that is the idea that we are born with a blank slate. It's called blank slate theory. So let me quote Rand to give an idea of what Rand thinks and what I've been challenging. This is the main quote I challenge from Rand. Man is born with an emotional mechanism, just as he is born with a cognitive mechanism, but at birth, both are tabula rasa. It is man's cognitive faculty, his mind, that determines the content of both. Now, my challenge so far has been mostly in the idea that our emotional mechanism is tabula rasa, not so much the cognitive. I've been hammering that if our emotional mechanism is blank, it means we can mold it, we can control it. Ayn Rand's next quote about it is that the mind programs it, tells it what to do. I have elaborate thoughts of this at my site, Ex-Objectivist. I do not think our emotional mechanism easily lends itself to being programmed, and I think it's extremely dangerous and leads to interpersonal abuse. However, my own child developmental research is starting to cause me to doubt this idea that our cognitive mechanism is born blank. And this is something that Jungian psychology already decimates. No neuroscientist is going to tell you that we're born emotionally blank. And Jungian psychologists and many thinkers have already rejected this idea that the cognitive mechanism is blank. Your cognitive mechanism is born with lots of stuff. Stuff that the cognitive mind itself did not put there. And so I used to not really focus on this, but I developed a new idea based on my child developmental research that I think that I am super excited for and I think could be revolutionary. Now I do child developmental research. My work is used by tens of thousands. I have hundreds, if not thousands, of notes at this point of how much I help people. And so I developed this idea that that human consciousness is formed due to a mechanism in the brain that projects images, that there is an image projection capability in the brain that itself drives the formation of human consciousness. So let me rewind a little bit. When you're born as a child, you're born expecting a human breast. Some call this a rooting reflex. I think it's way more than that. The rooting reflex is just, you tap their mouth and they turn toward it. I think it's way more than that. They expect a human breast. They want it to be there. You as a human are weighted to want to see certain things. There's images in your mind. So this is Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology is you're born with archetypes that you want to naturally go find. So one of them is a mother. You want to have a mother, and if you don't have a mother, you'll go find a similar figure to meet this very basic need of yours inside. So you could say that this is just a small issue, that a rooting reflex, who cares about the rooting reflex? There's certain things that are leftover baggage. This is what objectivists have told me, that a rooting reflex is just like banging on someone's knee and it kicks, and who cares? It doesn't matter. You're wrong. And you're shutting down an enormous amount of curiosity and intellectual thought because you're extremely arrogant. So, in my child developmental research, what I am finding is that an ability to conjure up an image in the mind seems to drive the development of consciousness itself. So the most observable, familiar example I could give for you is the imaginary friends children sometimes develop. So they develop them around age 4.5. Now this is what I mean by an image projection. There's something in their mind that they conjure up that projects out. And they see it. They see it in reality. So this is something that I was starting to notice in my work. So my work documents the age-related stages children go through. These are times when children act up at age-related times, but on the other side of this is an astonishing burst of new mental ability. So this is what my work has been documenting. I try to document when children seem to start acting up. I document in what way they are acting up, and I document what new skills I see. I have elaborate, detailed notes of all my children. I spend hours upon hours comparing children at exact age-related times. I typically take a 2-week chunk and compare it. And I compare the stories I wrote down and their photos. And I document it, and you can see my work at the Observant Mom. So what I noticed in doing this is that these patterns, these I call them milestones, I was noticing a pattern where children tended to go up into fantasy play and then come back down to reality. And this was a pattern that kept happening over and over. I have work up to age 4 that I've done detailed analysis on, and this keeps happening. It happens in every month, every 2 or 3 months. I call it a hill. And each hill has predictable sub-stages. But what starts the hill, what I'm going to focus on, is that children seem to be given, as if it's a gift, wild, highly imaginative, overly optimistic thinking. That's what seems to kick off each hill. So some examples of this overly optimistic thinking: they might think they can shrink. They might think they can jump over entire rivers. They think they can move houses at will. It's extremely optimistic. And my argument is that this is an impetus, that this causes them to want to go into reality to try this new thing that seems neat to them. And in doing this, they get an enormous amount of experience with reality. And so these wild images, and they seem, I can't be sure, but I think this brain upgrade that happens during sleep. It's as if some type of programming is released during their sleep. So this happens over and over and over again, and they want to see something. They're naturally weighted toward, can I jump over that river or whatever? And so something is put into their brain. So this is my argument, is that they're over and over again, the brain's image projection capability drives their development. So it's not just a rooting reflex. Like, this is core to the formation of consciousness itself. So, yeah. So you're always wanting to go see things naturally, and you can see it in other places. So like as a girl, one of the things I always was doing was I was always scanning the ground for sidewalk cracks in the sidewalk, and it tortured me. I was constantly counting them, and I wish I could stop. But I look back now and I see a girl who was weighted toward wanting to look at the ground and find plants. That you're weighted to want to see things. If you were dying of thirst in the desert, your brain would conjure up the image of a body of water, a mirage. That the brain naturally wants to see things. And in general, you don't see this image projection, because this image projection puts into place human consciousness. But once it's put into place, everything seems steady. You have object constancy. That's huge in child development. In general, what I find is if children are well loved, have strong relationships, feel safe and secure, this process goes well. If they are in despair, if they are abused or neglected, the process goes horribly. Like the man dying in the desert, they start to conjure up images, and it becomes swirling images in their mind, and they have no object constancy. They become, their permanent way of life is now lying and manipulating, but to them it doesn't even seem like lying, because there is no constant truth out there. So I'm trying to impress upon you how important this is, how important this process goes well, and how important it is that we understand it, and how if we understand it, we could probably heal more conditions than we can currently heal. But at any rate, I think this sentiment from Rand, and I'll read it again. Man is born with an emotional mechanism, just as he is born with a cognitive mechanism, but at birth, both are tabula rasa. It is man's cognitive faculty, his mind, that determines the content of both. This is false. I do not think the cognitive mind determines the content of the cognitive mind. There is stuff in there that is outside of our will. And in declaring such things as if obvious fact, Ayn Rand, a fiction writer who studied no one and healed no one, shuts down an enormous amount of curiosity about life, human nature, and consciousness itself. So this is my accusation against Rand. She thinks she understands human nature, and she doesn't. She has a very abysmal, pessimistic view of human nature. And then to add insult, she goes and codifies it into a ethics. The objective ethics rests on all these premises. It says you should use your mind at all times because it determines the content of everything. And so once you put it into a code of ethics, it's now set in stone. It's very hard to get people to leave something that they have adopted as their morality. This is what I call moral bias. When you decided a moral ideal shines so brightly and is so virtuous, it then shines brightly in your eye and it's in your mind, and it's very hard to get people away from it. I can barely put a dent into objectivist thinking. They immediately belittle me, they dismiss me. They have a morally justified system that is integral to their survival, and so they see me as irrational, destructive, sadistic. So the book is going to be The Moral Bias of Objectivism, How Moral Ideals Cloud Objectivity. My website is Ex-Objectivist.com. Thanks for watching.